I have to say, I have a lot of memories of Diane. I guess I feel as though I've known you my whole life.
The news of Diane Keaton's passing on October 11th, 2025, sent shockwaves through the entire film world. She departed in solitude, having battled her relentless illnesses. But what shocked the public even more than her death was the reaction of Al Pacino, her 15-year on-screen partner. Immediately after receiving the news, Al Pacino quietly wept and exclaimed, "I will regret for the rest of my life not marrying Diane. She was the greatest love of my life." He recalled that when Diane had once said, "Marry me or we break up," he chose to walk away. And now that regret has become an unbearable burden. Not attending the funeral, but Chino chose to remember Diane in his heart, keeping all memories of her alive. From old photographs, handwritten letters to small gifts, as if each keepsake reminded him that Diane never truly left. What heartbreaking scenes unfolded at Diane's funeral? Who was there to pay their final respects? Watch the video to find out. On the morning of October 11th, 2025 in Los Angeles, the day was gentle and clear, sunlight filtering through tall leaves onto the road before the mansion Diane Keaton once called a private sanctuary of imagination. The house was quiet as always, with only the wind and birdsong. But inside, that calm was shattered by something no one could have anticipated. At 8:08 a.m., the emergency dispatch received a brief call. Person down. No further details, just three cold, weighty words. Rescue 19 immediately headed out, unaware that in a few minutes they would enter the home of one of America's legendary film stars. When the paramedics arrived, the iron gate was still closed and there was no unusual noise. A woman inside opened the door and led them in. Diane Keaton was found motionless in the room, flooded with light she had used for reading scripts and writing in her journal. Everything around her was neat. No signs of disturbance or fallen objects. Only silence remained, thick, like the nature of her departure itself. They transported her along the tree-lined street that Diane had driven down countless times. The ambulance departed in silence, as if respecting the fragile peace of the morning. Just hours later, the world learned that Diane Keaton had passed away at the age of 79. The news spread quickly, but all details of her final health condition were kept private. The family confirmed her sudden health decline, but refused to disclose the cause. In the following days, journalists and fans began piecing together fragments of information. Diane had spoken about her battles with skin cancer, her difficult years with eating disorders, and her more frail appearance in recent times. But no one had evidence that any of this directly related to her final morning. Every detail remained vague, like sunlight filtering through the leaves of her mansion. Brilliant, yet torn into countless fragments. Hollywood was shaken. Those who had worked with Diane, from Woody Allen to Nancy Meyers, sent tributes recalling her signature smile. The fedora slightly tilted on her hair, the natural poise no one could imitate. Yet behind the praise, a void remained. Who was the first to notice her fall? Who called for help? And why did everything happen so fast, so quietly? No one has a definitive answer. However, we will explore the illnesses that plagued Diane later in the video. For now, let's move on to Diane Keaton's funeral, where a legend was laid to rest. What we know is that Diane Keaton's funeral took place shortly afterward. The family chose a small seaside garden where ancient olive trees whispered with the wind, as if nature itself kept the private promise Diane once recorded in her memoir. Her family, along with her two adopted children, Dexter and Duke, selected this peaceful corner far from the Hollywood spotlight she had conquered, but never let define her. On October 14th, 2025, just 3 days after her passing, the film world paused for a moment to honor the woman who had reshaped the image of humor and resilience. As the first guests quietly stepped through the wrought iron gate, the air was heavy with wordless grief. Bette Midler, Diane's companion through the laughter of the First Wives Club, arrived first, her gray scarf concealing tear-stained cheeks. She held Carol Bayer Sager's hand, who had witnessed Diane's frailty in her final days, whispering, "She never pretended, never competed. She was simply Diane with that mischievous smile." They sat in the front row beside simple white flowers. Not vibrant roses, but sprigs of lavender from Diane's old garden symbolizing the simplicity she always pursued. No grand orchestra played, only an old piano softly sounding the melody from Annie Hall, the music Diane once called the laughter of my soul. The family was the heart of the ceremony, a warm circle amid the salty sea breeze. Dexter, the 29-year-old daughter, with eyes like her mother, stood first, her voice trembling yet resolute. Mom taught us that life is a comedy, sometimes clumsy, sometimes painful, but always worth applauding. Duke, her 25-year-old son, sat beside her, holding her hand, eyes red, as he recalled afternoons when Diane wore eccentric hats, laughing with Reggie, her golden retriever companion. They didn't break into sobs but shared small stories, how Diane adopted them at 50, how she turned the house into a world of books and unfinished scripts. This was her wish. Not a showy ceremony, but a place where family could whisper words of love away from prying eyes. Woody Allen arrived late, dwarfed by the simple wooden chairs, his pale face like someone stepping out of an old film. The man who created Annie Hall with Diane, the masterpiece that won her the 1978 Oscar, sat alone, a cigarette unlit in hand. When invited to speak, his voice was hoarse. Diane was the embodiment of creativity. She didn't act. She lived with self-deprecating humor that only true geniuses possess. Those around nodded, recalling the complex but inspiring relationship between them. Films like Sleeper and Manhattan had portrayed Diane Keaton as unyielding, always challenging conventions. No arguments, only a quiet tribute to a woman who transformed fear into laughter. Also present were Francis Ford Coppola, who cast Diane as Kay Adams in the Godfather trilogy, stepping in with heavy steps as if carrying the legacy of the 1970s. He embraced Robert De Niro, a longtime colleague, before sitting. Everything about Diane was creativity, Coppola said in a brief eulogy, his warm voice echoing through the simple microphone. De Niro, eyes red, added, "I am deeply saddened and shocked. I cherished her, a kind woman in a chaotic world." They spoke of long nights on set where Diane not only acted but encouraged everyone, turning tragic scenes into moments of humanity. The air seemed to thicken as everyone listened silently, like watching a classic film one last time. Two other figures attended, Reese Witherspoon and Goldie Hawn, representing the next generation, carrying wildflowers from fields Diane once loved. Witherspoon, whom Diane had mentored as a teen in Wildflower, spoke with a choked voice. She changed how we see women on screen. Smart, funny, and completely original. Hawn, with a sad smile, held Jane Fonda tightly, whispering about book club gatherings where Diane was always the center with quirky fashion and everyday stories. Michael Douglas, sitting in the back row, called the loss heartbreaking, praising Diane as one of the greatest icons. As the sun set behind the horizon, the ceremony moved to a memorial of her legacy. A large screen played clips. Diane in Something's Got to Give, smiling brightly beside Jack Nicholson. Diane in Father of the Bride, embracing Steve Martin like a true mother. Each scene reminded attendees of her journey, from a girl in Santa Ana with Broadway dreams, through groundbreaking roles to a mother, director, and quiet advocate for mental health. Leonardo DiCaprio, sitting quietly, whispered to a companion, "She was one of a kind, and I was honored to work with her." No raucous songs, only gentle piano notes, guiding people into reflection, where sorrow blended with gratitude. However, the most special person to pay tribute to Diane was her former lover, Al Pacino. He was a longtime colleague and had been the great love of her life. Upon hearing the news of Keaton's passing, Pacino sank into a pain described by close friends as extremely profound and haunting. Their relationship began in 1971 on the set of The Godfather, where Keaton played Kay Adams and Pacino embodied Michael Corleone. Those years together, though full of passion and challenges, left an indelible mark on him. And now that regret has become a dominating emotion. Close friends recounted that he wept the moment he received the news, hands trembling as he gripped the phone. unable to believe that the woman he had loved deeply and devoted his youth to remembering was gone forever. He sat quietly for hours, eyes fixed on old photographs on the table, moments of Diane laughing on the set of The Godfather, everyday smiles in Santa Ana that Pacino kept in albums, looking over them again and again in silence. Pacino never publicly issued a direct statement about KEATON'S passing. Instead, his closest friends revealed that he was in deep anguish and regret for not proposing when the opportunity was in his hands. "Marry me or we break up," Keaton had said. Pacino chose to walk away, and now after her death he realizes that opportunity was lost forever. Friends described him repeatedly saying, "If it's destiny, you let it go. But now the heart breaks. It is my only regret." Pacino did not attend the funeral. It was his personal tribute, and in private he held on to every photograph and letter she gave him over the years. By 2025, Diane Keaton's health had started to fail. Her weight loss, paleness, and frailty were noticed during her final months. Although she bravely continued her work as a writer, her body had begun to deteriorate. Several years prior, she had made the painful decision to leave her Los Angeles home, a sign of the end. It was in the final years of her life that she sold off the estate to ensure that her children would have a secure future. Her final estate was worth an estimated $100 million derived from royalties, real estate ventures, and her extensive film career. However, Diane had taken precautions to ensure that everything would go to Dexter and Duke, avoiding unnecessary court drama. As was her wish, her legacy was protected from prying eyes. Diane Keaton's passing was the end of an era, yet her impact, both on-screen and off, will resonate through the generations, reminding us of the power of love, laughter, and authenticity.